Hey everyone. Today on Coffee Talk, me and Phil are going to be talking about obligatory coffee, talking about one of our favorite series, John Wick. Today's broadcast, by the way, brought to you by Nescafe Classico crystals. These are the decaf because I need to chill out a little. Although I can drink.
I'm old. I have to drink decaf in the afternoon or it keeps me awake.
Yeah, my mother's the same way. Actually, most people I know are like that. I have this weird thing where I can drink an entire pot of coffee and still go right to sleep, and it's a problem. Makes no sense
When
at
I
all.
had when I had untreated sleep apnea, I was exhausted all the time, and I could do that. I could drink coffee and go immediately to sleep. I would fall asleep when I stopped talking. So one time I fell asleep in the middle of my own sentence, and my friend looked at me and said, "Did you just fall asleep?" So that's when you know you've got problems.
That's when
But
you know.
yeah,
That's the sign. Yeah. Which,
but
hey,
now my sleep apnea is being treated, so I sleep, which ironically means sometimes I don't. And if I drink coffee late at night, I don't sleep. I don't fall asleep at all. So
wow. Which we should totally do a coffee talk about coffee. It's like the coffee table book about coffee tables. And if you don't have a remember, yeah. Okay.
we
So
might need a supplemental topic of some kind. That seems a little
probably
recursive.
it's a show about nothing. There's a show. That's a show. Okay.
What's the deal with all this coffee? Sorry, that's not in any way a passable Jerry Seinfeld. But,
It's not bad. You got to be more shouty about it.
well,
Kramer,
yeah,
George, George. Okay.
he is very frantic and shouty. He's kind of like I sort of almost managed a Chris Rock the other day. I'm
Oh,
Chris Rock, and those people slapped me, and I'm mad about it. It's in my special now.
that's
It's
not
not
bad.
really very good.
Yeah.
Well, you just got to kind of get more like his conversational speaking voice and his comedy voice are clearly not the same.
Right.
And it really felt, I watched parts of the new special that he put out on Netflix, and it really feels like a put on. Like he's almost doing a Bobcat Goldthwait voice when he does stand up,
Yes.
which, he's more talented than that.
Yeah.
He has done acting, and he even mentioned that he was Pookie in New Jack City.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it was a fine dramatic role. He plays a strung out junkie who ultimately ends up, if I remember correctly, dead for his trouble. And it was a good role for him. It's a perfectly serious role, no comedy at all. I remember seeing an interview with Judd Nelson where he said that they had put a lot of dark makeup on him because otherwise the lighting would not have worked because the cast is primarily black, and of course with darker skin tone you got to ratchet the light up. So Judd as a white guy would have been glowing like a beacon among the rest of them if they hadn't darkened him up to level it out.
Hmm.
So it's a good movie. I remember being very fond of that movie in the 90s
Huh.
or whenever it was it came out.
Yeah, I think it was early 90s. I'll have to go
It
watch
has a very
it now.
feel.
Yeah. Okay. So, John Wick. Uh, Perhaps picking up on where we left off. Although, maybe. No, let's pick up where we left off. Vigo makes the first film, in my opinion. And there's all kinds of like Greek mythology and stuff, especially in that first movie. Winston's kind of you got this underground underworld world, and that's how it feels. And Winston is sort of Hades-ish, and uh,
Well, yeah, because the desk man Sharon, is
oh,
the
that's
boatman to hell.
yes.
You
Oh
know,
my
and
gosh, you're right.
and,
Yeah,
and how explicit is it? You give your gold coin to Sharon the
right.
counterman, and suddenly you're in this world. I saw an interview where they said that the money is. It might be Louis C.K. who did a routine on this. How in old movies nobody counted the money. It's like, here is one money for you, sir. Here is a bag representing one money for this transaction. And in John Wick, it seems like everything costs one coin unless
One
it
money.
doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's really, the significance is really more showing I'm part of this world, this underworld that is operating in tandem with the quote unquote real world.
Which I just had this thought in a way that's brilliant because there's such a high level of the punishment for any misdoing is death, right? Excommunicado. There's such a high level of like every little thing you do matters. Everything you do, every tiny favor you do for each other is like a big deal. And so, kind of everything costing the same amount, to me, it speaks to that. It's like, well, no matter how small a thing this is, that's what it's worth.
Well, each body is one coin. I noticed that he counted out the same number
Oh,
of
yeah.
coins as
The
guys that he killed
demonstration.
in the first film.
Yeah. Hmm. So, there, man, that guy probably cleans up.
Well,
Probably.
yeah, but see, it's kind of a sliding scale because one coin is also take my dog to the Continental, Mr. Taxi Driver, who's inexplicably part of this world because there isn't anyone in Manhattan who isn't.
Which I
It's
feel is
a
accurate.
weird sort of thing. It costs you one coin to get into the club. You got to put the coin in the slot to get into the club. So sooner or later, either things are wildly expensive or wildly inexpensive, and it's not clear which is
Hmm.
the problem when your whole economy is built on one money. So.
Which they kind of did a good job explaining that in the third film. Which, by the way, I love the aesthetic and the feel and the uh, lenses and everything they used almost in the third film is that's my favorite cinematographic style.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that everything is neon and vibrant, and everything has
Yeah.
just recently been drenched in water so that it reflects. It's
Yeah.
a it's a very beautifully rendered world, and I think I saw an interview with either the directors or someone else about that film that said that New York is almost a character. We talked about, that in the Longmire series that the Absaroka County is almost a character in the film or in the series rather, and this external environment really pins Wick in time and space. When he goes outside of New York, it doesn't feel right. When he's off
Yes.
in Marrakesh or wherever it is, it feels
Rocco.
very much like a departure.
Yeah.
Like Wick belongs in New York City doing John Wick things. And so when he's gone, it seems strange.
Yeah. But it was cool that even in Morocco, like, welcome to Casablanca, Mr. Wick. Everyone knows
Well,
Mr. Wick.
everyone knows, and like when he goes to the Hasidic shop where he has some of his backup gear stored. And what
Oh,
I loved about that
yeah.
was when he
Yeah.
walks out, he's wearing a turtleneck that's very much out of style because he
Yeah.
stashed those clothes a while ago.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah,
it's like this old, like early 90s Glock 26 or something in there, and like everything in there is
yeah.
dated. That was a smart, yeah, I like that.
Well, and the guy knows him. He's in a good hunting, Mr. Wick, or whatever it is he
Yes.
says to him. And the idea that he then walked to Rome because we see him walking away, and when next we see him, he's in Rome in the same outfit. So he basically just walked through time and space to Rome, where his next
Yeah.
sequence of events was to take place.
Yes.
So there's a little bit of weird interdimensional traveling that takes place in connecting some of the segments of John Wick, and some of that is necessary due to the environment. Like in the first film, they spoke explicitly about how do we have a car chase in New York City? The traffic is too much. There's no real way to do it. So they set the climactic car battle on the pier, where there was a big open space for them to operate in. And then somehow I don't know, maybe they were successful enough, they got enough money to either film on a location that was made to look like New York or to block off some streets somewhere because they had an out and out car chase scene at the beginning of the next film.
Right.
I think that was two. Sometimes they blur
Yeah,
together a little bit,
it was. Yeah.
but because I don't know if you spent any time in New York City, but it's not difficult to drive in New York City because you can't go fast enough to actually have an accident. There's so much traffic; it's insane. You stop at an intersection, and then people wash around you like salmon going upstream. And if you're trying to walk anywhere in New York, you can't walk any faster than everyone else is walking because there's nowhere around them. You can't go around them. There's people. So the
Could be.
the when we see people in New York in any movie interacting in a way that there isn't a crush of people everywhere, that's unnatural. It is clearly not how reality works. In every movie where people go to the top of the Empire State Building and there's room to move around, yeah, that doesn't happen in real life. In real life, they're packed in there like sardines, working their way in and out of the viewing area to get to the edge and back.
Okay.
So,
All right. So the end of Sleepless in Seattle would not have happened that way, probably.
not unless the place was shut down, but yeah, because
Okay.
it's always packed with people up there.
Um, anyway, in part three, they did I thought, a pretty good job of attempting to explain that monetary exchange with Halle Berry's former boss, and he's got, but that aesthetic, I love all the old um, Syrian, Afghan, different aspects of Arabic culture and finding its way into, and that's even where the finger thing came from, which I'll get to that in a minute. But I think they did a pretty good job explaining the first coin was ever minted in this facility in an agreement, an exchange between parties, a mark of trust. It was, and that's kind of the whole thing. Is just I'm trusting you with this act.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about the series going on has been the inevitable expansion of the universe of John Wick. It's
Mhm.
just cool getting more and more details, and done a good job of making sure to give us more details with each one. You know, you get really just hints at it in the first film, and then because the scope of that film is relatively small, that is a relatively low budget film, even though it's obviously very professionally made and it's not a B film in any way. I'm sure if you compared the budget for John Wick 1 to John Wick 3 and 4, there's a marked difference there because nothing succeeds in Hollywood so much as success. And if they know they can keep putting Keanu Reeves, in situations where people are trying to kill him and will fork over money for it, they'll keep doing it.
Yeah,
So,
and we appreciate it.
yeah, I wish they would just keep making John Wick films. I do strongly worry that this series ends with him dead because you cannot kill a marching band to get where you are and expect to be alive at the end of it. The directors have said as much in so many words. Like, this guy's a mass murderer. So, there's very few roads to a happy ending. Now, could they have maybe said that as a way of throwing us off so that we expect he'll die so we're surprised when he doesn't? I don't know. It's always a surprise when you think this movie has to end in tragedy and it doesn't. Open Range, the Western with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall.
I like that
I
movie.
had that movie pegged from 1,000 miles out as well. There's no way he's not dead by the end of this. And spoiler alert, when he's not, I'm like, really? Happy ending?
Yeah,
Okay. Like, I'm cool with that. So I don't see how this series realistically ends with him not dead, but they might surprise us. I don't know.
yeah. Well, I think we all. I personally, there we go. I want to see him live because if you see though, if he doesn't, all of this has been for naught.
Well, the way I see it, if he does die at the end of the series, they will arrange it in such a way that his death accomplishes some other goal in the service of life. It wouldn't be the case that he would just lose at the end of the film because that would be unsatisfying. If he does die, it will be because he heroically sacrifices himself to accomplish some other goal. I mean, the fact is, even though we as the audience don't like it when our beloved characters die, actors adore it. Every actor longs for an
Yeah,
incredible death scene. When Leonard Nimoy was brought back for Star Trek 2, he didn't want to do it, especially because Star Trek 1 had not been particularly well received, and they promised him a fantastic death scene, and so that's why he did it. And then, of course, it was successful, and weirdly, he was okay with coming back for a whole bunch more. But
yeah.
actors love that kind of thing. So I'm not sure what Keanu Reeves' thoughts are on that. I would like to think that after they spend so much time with the character, like any character that you build for so much depth into, you feel like you know what the character would and wouldn't do and what would be a satisfying end for the character. It's why the end of a series like Dexter was so unsatisfactory during its initial run. I have not seen the sequel Dexter series, so I couldn't speak to that. But they ruined that character with the terrible ending that they put on the show and made us not want to watch the show ever again by violating the character. So when you take away what we thought of as the character's good points and you ruin it, then it has retroactive consequences. It's the same thing with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I didn't have a problem with that, but a lot of people did because they saw it as retroactively spoiling the character. What's the point of me getting into what Luke is doing if by the end he's a bitter old man who's withdrawn from the world? Well, I don't know, apart from that being a grand Jedi tradition of bitter old men withdrawing from the world when they lose. But I understand the audience's feelings And then I also understand that there are practical um, realities. Harrison Ford desperately wanted his character to be killed off at the end of Return of the Jedi, and they didn't kill him because they knew it would affect toy sales. It's why Black Widow was not a hit, because among other things, nobody cares about a character who's already dead in the timeline. This may be a prequel where she's alive, but why should I care? The character's dead. So, and I know that makes no sense because this is all fictional, but people feel that way.
Yeah, it's the most fans that are. I'm trying not to. I care about semantic noise in the minds of my viewers and readers. People that are real hardcore about something, we'll put it that way, they will get angry with each other and have all-out fights over the life or death of a fictional character. And say, well, all I care about is there any real meaning that we can ascribe to this? Is this good? Is this bad? And I heard, okay, let's go back to Luke. Because who's more quintessential than Luke Skywalker? Someone criticized The Last Jedi. They almost had a valid point about, well, his sacrifice in that fateful scene where he's like bilocating, his sacrifice meant nothing, didn't do anything. I beg to differ. That's the beauty of it. It was, he bought the rebellion time, which is the one thing
Yeah.
the First Order and the Empire, for all their infinite resources, cannot manufacture one more second of. And it's the only non-renewable resource that we all have is time. And it was the smallest thing, but it did, by buying that little section of time, it essentially saved the day.
Yeah, there are a number of plot holes in that film and things that don't quite work that they've had to sort of retroactively sweep away. Like, if once you establish that it's possible to just hyperspeed a ship through another ship, why wouldn't everybody do it all the time? And they had to go, well, that's a very specific thing. Hand wave, in a
Well, because
subsequent
it's
film.
also, that destroys your ship too, right? It's not like
Well,
you have,
yes, but if
like if we're
if
all
it
doing that
worked,
all the
people would.
time, it's the space equivalent of an eye for an eye. You can't.
Yeah, but if it really worked, people would just be shooting remote piloted
Oh yeah,
hyperspeed capable
drones.
fighters at everything. Yeah, I mean, this is a universe where we have intelligent droids who can fly ships.
Yeah,
So,
I think
but
I
yeah,
get
I
the sense.
think just to bring it back to John Wick, I think
Please, yeah,
people don't want to see a character betrayed. So whatever
yeah,
ending he comes to, it just needs to be consistent with the character based on events that we haven't seen yet and don't know, because a lot can change in the course of a movie. Circumstances can change. Like what if in a future film they suddenly discover that John Wick has a child? Suddenly his dog doesn't mean a whole lot. They could do that. It could be
there he is.
a child from a previous relationship. There's, when you're writing, you're the god of your universe. You can invent anything. You can retcon anything. It's only how skillfully do you do it? How much are you forcing it? And as long as it's not forced, as long as it works, as long as you earn it, then the audience will accept it.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one's kind of about his wife and consequence and things balancing out, and the fact that you can't really escape your karma, or to a degree, if you're involved enough, the karma of anyone that you're closely attached to. So, company you keep is very important. And Vigo experiences a lot of the same consequences. And the second one, it seems like John having to learn to live for himself and just wanting to keep going for the sake of keeping going. And one might say that, well, that's not about his wife. At this point, it's just a selfish thing. And as the Italian guy said, you're addicted to revenge, John, which is, of course, not true, at least mostly not true. I think that it's a valiant thing if someone's trying to do you wrong and you've come this far and someone's trying to screw you over. It's, giving him a 0.45-inch lobotomy at the dinner table was the right thing to do, because it's the only way that as long as that guy's living, there's going to be a price on John's head. And what Italian guy's trying to do is not just. And, it's like John's come this far. It's the only thing John can do. What do you think?
Well, I think him misjudging John's motivation points to his own, like, this is a guy who doesn't love anyone but himself. So he can't conceive of a motivation that isn't kind of selfish. And being addicted to revenge is the kind of selfish motivation that he can relate to.
That he would. Oh,
So he,
yeah.
so he sees that in John, even though he's wrong. John's motivations are much more complex. And I think, Wick has to figure out, like, his first movie is about just learning to not be suicidal because he's lost his wife. And him getting the new dog at the end of the film, sort of representative of him going, okay, I guess I'll be alive, because he clearly didn't care if he lived or died. At
Yeah.
the end, he almost seems like, okay, I'm willing to just die while watching this video. I want to be with my wife, and I don't care if I live or die. And then suddenly he realizes, he's like, no, I can't do that. And he forces himself up, and he finds the new dog at the clinic, and that's clearly him embracing the concept of life. But he still doesn't really know what he's living for. And in the second film, like you said, he tells whatever the title of the guy in the tent is. I don't know what that dude's title is, but he tells him that he wants to live for the sake of remembering his wife. But that's not a motivation to be alive. It's not enough. And like you said previously, when we talked about this off air, cutting off his finger, even though it created all kinds of problems for the special effects team, that is symbolic of him letting go of his wife being the purpose for everything, and him embracing, like, they even talk about, what kind of life do you want to have? Do you want to live as a tool of the table, as their assassin, with their permission, or do you want to live for yourself? And Winston plays on that when they have their confrontation. Did you want to shoot me? And in the third film, did you want to shoot me and live for the table,
Oh,
or did
yes.
you want to, not shoot me and live your own life?
Like, what version of John Wick do you want to be remembered as
Yeah,
yourself? Since we're talking about memory, how do you want to be remembered, John? Yeah.
right. So that third film really is John deciding, okay, in the first film I decided I want to live. In the second film I have to decide why I want to live. What's the valid reason for that? And then in the third film he's trying to figure out, who do I want to be, with the stipulation that I'm alive to be it.
Yeah.
And then of course at the end of that film, one of the things we're struggling with is, did Winston betray him, or was he being
Yeah.
really clever?
Yeah.
And it could break either way.
Mm.
Now, betraying John Wick seems like a great way not to live much longer.
Mm.
So I'm pretty sure that was all planned, and that they were play acting for the sake of the adjudicator, and that
Yeah.
Winston, after everything he's been through, and after John didn't kill him, would not turn around and betray John Wick. I would like to hope that the character has
Oh,
more moral fiber than. I mean, he gave him a marker, which
right.
I'm assuming will come up later.
I'm hoping
So,
it makes an appearance in this next. Yeah. Okay. So, just side note, Winston is, in a rare instance, John probably is my favorite. I rarely have my favorite character be the main character, but he probably is my favorite character. But Winston comes a close second. And the only reason I'm not listing Marcus, as I have told you many times, I love Marcus, is that he passes away in the first film. So continuing character, I love Winston a lot. They should make a show where Ian McShane is just walking around the Continental, majestically slinging open the elevator cage and just doing Winston stuff all day. I would watch that. That's a show.
well, that could easily be one of those single camera, all the action takes place on this one set type of shows, is Winston running the Continental and all the stuff that comes through those doors.
Yeah.
I remember I was relatively young when I realized that there were so many TV shows that I watched, shows like Barney Miller, where everything happens in one room. Occasionally they would depart from that, but most everything happens on that one set. And all the action either comes to you or you hear about it. Well, you could easily do that kind of a bottle script sort of show where you're in the Continental and guests come in and you interact with them. And it would be a really fun
Yeah.
show.
Yeah,
So,
totally. There you go. Uh, Please, someone steal that, please. Um, what is your favorite? What's your favorite movie action-wise of the three so far, and why?
I believe it's hard to pick, but like the first movie has more emotional resonance because we're really on board with John, the
Yeah.
fact that he's lost so much. So
Yeah.
that's a very painful movie. And I read somewhere that superheroes are often defined by their tragedy. Batman is a character who is
Sure.
defined by the tragedy of losing his parents, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Tony Stark is defined by the tragedy of what happened to him, his injury, and his guilt over what brought him to that pass.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to not embrace the emotional resonance of that first film. But purely from a character standpoint, I love the third one because I love Mark Dacascos's character of Zero, because he's insecure about the fact that he's this deadly murderer, but he wants John Wick to acknowledge him as an equal, and Wick won't do it. And even right up to the point where they have their climactic deaths or fight scene, and Zero is stabbed and dying and trying like, I'll catch up. And Wick could easily throw him a bone and say, okay. But instead he says, because even as the poor schmuck is dying, Wick will not let him believe himself to be John Wick's equal, which is what Zero so desperately wants. It's why he fought him in the first place without just shooting him down from a distance. He could have. I believe John Wick had no gun by that point. He wanted to prove to himself that he was as good and better as John Wick. It was very integral to his personality. Yeah. So I love that insecurity. He's the Joxer the Mighty of John Wick characters. Joxer was a character played by Ted Raimi in the Xena series, and he was a would-be warrior who wasn't good at it.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Okay.
Yeah, so I love that. I love that insecurity. It makes him so fun as a character. The Donnie Yen character. I'm a big fan of the Yip Man movies that Donnie Yen starred in, and I love that they took Donnie Yen and they went, Zatoichi with him. They made him the blind swordsman, and I love the Zatoichi films. There's an old HBO movie called Blind Justice starring Armand Assante, and that's a fun movie too. He's a blind gunslinger. They did the same thing in Once Upon a Time in Mexico with the Johnny Depp character.
Oh,
Our society is just really into the idea of these psychically powerful blind characters who can fight and kill other dudes without being able to see anything. What the heck is the name of the movie? Denzel Washington is carrying the last Bible.
The Book of so-and-so.
The Book of Eli. Yeah, Book of Eli. That's the same. Book of Eli is basically Zatoichi, except that you're not in on the joke. Somebody once told me they were about to watch Book of Eli for the first time, and I told them, when you get to the end of the movie, you're going to have a question. The answer to that question is yes. And the question, of course, that everyone has at the end of Book of Eli was, really? He was blind the whole time? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I just spoiled the film if you've never seen it. But if you haven't seen it, why haven't you? It's really old. So
yeah, really? Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm looking forward to the Donnie Yen character because he strikes me as the type of character who doesn't have that insecurity, who's very confident in his abilities, as a blind man would have to be an assassin in this world. So I'm really looking forward to those interactions. And I think Keanu Reeves does such a great job of acting like, I will if I have to. Like, every time he fights these people, it's clear that he's exhausted. He'd rather not do it, but he'll still do it. And this was the most it's ever been when he fights the two Karambit guys right before he fights Zero's character in the third film. And at one point he's like, just give me a minute. And they are polite enough to give him a minute.
Yeah.
And, they're carrying on. And
he's old. Let's give him a minute.
Yeah. Like, give him a chance. I was expecting better. Come on, man. It's John Wick. So, and that's why after he defeats them, he does them the same courtesy and does not kill them.
Yes.
You guys gave me, like, if you hadn't given me that option, you probably would have killed me. And since I've now defeated you fair and square, I'm going to treat you fair and square, which is, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, me too. I normally am not overly fond of stuff like that, but I think it was warranted there, and I'd be more disappointed if he didn't. Yeah.
Realistically, the world's most effective assassin would not leave live enemies behind him. He would have killed both of those guys and said, too bad. Shouldn't have given me a chance. Should have killed me when you had the chance. That old line. But he doesn't, because it's consistent with who he is as a person. He'd really rather not be doing any of this. And he brings that beautiful sort of John McClane in Die Hard energy to everything he's doing. Like, I'd really rather not. I will, and I'll be good at it, but I'd rather not.
Yeah. The reluctant hero. But, those guys, they're not, they're working for coinage. They're working for money. And if Zero's the problem, then all I got to do is get rid of Zero, and maybe sometime in the future, because I let these guys live, just like in real life, you do a favor from someone, for someone, very often happens that and
Well,
you shouldn't do stuff like that for that reason. That now you
yeah,
owe me, but it is a nice thing.
there's a heavy frenemy vibe among all of these people a
Hmm.
lot of the time. They all know each other. Like when he first interacts with Common, they know each other, and
Yes.
Common is like, "Are you working, or is there some possibility you just came to the party?" And Wick could lie. Be like, "No, no, I'm just passing
Right.
through," but he doesn't. And the fact that he doesn't lie is why they start fighting right then and there, because he'd want the same courtesy. So I think a lot of the way John Wick operates is I give people the same courtesy I would want them to extend to me. And then when they don't extend me courtesy, I shoot them in the face a bunch of times.
Yeah. Which I have a similar. For me, the whole concept of should we go into martial arts just a little bit here? Just a
That's
little.
probably
Well,
appropriate.
let's circle back around quickly. Um, so my whole thing about so-called de-escalation or the ladder of de-escalation is that once stuff starts going down, it basically does not exist. As long as we're talking, okay? As long as we're talking, there's a real opportunity. I can, if it's a hot day, I might have a spare ginger ale or something, and we can talk this out, whatever the problem is. But once stuff starts, so in light of that, my thing is be ridiculously kind up to that point because there's no reason to not be ridiculously kind because if things go south, then you can always be finally and demonstrably, you can put a period at the end of that sentence if you need
Yeah,
to.
no one is harmed by being polite to start.
Thank you.
So, and
Uh,
there's that old saw from Ayn Rand, which was probably stolen from Aristotle. But we can only deal with each other through reason or through force. And if we leave the realm of reason, you can't reason with force. You have to answer it with
yeah,
force.
yeah,
So and that goes back to that negotiation between Vigo and John at the beginning of the very first movie, where Vigo goes into his safe and gets his dusty old address book and calls the landline in John's house and
yeah.
is like, I'm really trying to work this out so that we don't have to fight. But Vigo is prideful and loses
Yeah.
his temper when Wick gives him nothing. He starts trying to lecture John about not giving in to his baser instinct. Let us not give in to our baser
Base our
instincts. And
instincts.
that's
Mhm.
yeah, and that's when Wick hangs up on him because it's the wrong tone. If Vigo had stayed humble,
Thank you.
they
Yeah,
might have been able to reach some sort of accommodation. But once that was in motion, now Wick wants revenge, and Vigo's not willing to prostrate himself to give him anything that would be the equivalent. And Vigo's not willing to let him just kill his son, which Wick seems to think he should do. Like, I won't come after you, just let me kill your son,
yeah.
which no one would say yes to.
Right.
Vigo only says yes to that eventually and gives up his son because he's scared to die himself. Like
Yes.
he may be going through the motions of being a loving father, and when he kills Marcus, it's clear that he's upset that his son was killed. He says to Marcus, "If you had done your job, my son would be still alive." And it's a very memorable line because he has that weird word reversal in it that's kind of part of how the character speaks.
Mhm.
But it he doesn't love his son enough to sacrifice his life for his son. I'll never tell you where my son is. He just doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
So, but he's willing, once he's in a position of power again, he's willing to take revenge. And then in their climactic battle at the pier, he knows he's dead. He knows he cannot beat John Wick, but he's willing to give it a try. And that's why he gets so weird and kind of hysterical. Well, not hysterical. He's sort of wryly amused. He gives his
Yeah.
his lawyer the gun, but teases him with it. And he's like,
Well,
that guy's gonna die too.
and he's high at the moment. Yeah, but
Yeah, but he clearly doesn't. He's run out of any kind of uh investment. He's just like, oh,
yeah,
let's go.
it's like
Whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
right.
So he's willing to fight. He gets out his knife and he's willing to fight Wick, somebody he knows he can't beat, but he's
Actually, you
willing to
know,
try.
I because John is on the upswing of sort of reintegrating his John Wickness in the reluctant hero journey. Uh, I think if anyone in the film kind of stood a chance against John just because of experience, burliness, strength, and I thought I saw some Sambo uh, coming from Vigo, he had some skill, and he had a knife. He was playing dirty, and John did
Well,
not. For a lot of reasons, I think he might have accidentally taken John, had John not
uh,
been smart enough to do what he did.
yeah, if only if John had not been like if he made a mistake, if he made an error, then
Yeah.
yes, it's possible that they would have killed each other in that case. The only character in the entire film who was really enough of a challenge to actually defeat John Wick was the Russian security guy who was head of the security at the Red Circle.
Oh, that
Um,
put a bottle in his
yeah,
gut. Yeah.
that guy came as close as anybody to killing John Wick. There's that wonderful moment where he falls off the upper level and he
And he,
hits with such
oh,
finality, such
I know.
gravity. It's like thud.
Thud. Yeah.
And you feel it feels painful. You're like, oh, that must hurt
Yes.
so much.
Yeah.
So that guy came the closest of any of them. And he was determined to do it. He was not messing around.
Yeah.
But the only reason he didn't win is because the protagonist has plot armor.
Yeah. Which, speaking of the security personnel, let's jump to maybe the second one and talk about Ruby Rose. I thought it was a really valiant, which interesting character, first off, but I thought it was pretty valiant. Kudos, doing your job right. Put yourself before the principal. Tell them, you go do the thing. I'll take care of John Wick. And but and knowing that probably she's going to wind up in that elevator, stuck in an elevator with John Wick, and she knows she's
Yeah.
going to
You
die,
know,
but she
the
does
worst
it
place in
anyway.
the world is you never want to be in a closet with John Wick. He's the
Yeah,
world's most consummate close quarters fighter.
right.
I think they did a good job of capitalizing on Ruby Rose's strengths while minimizing her weaknesses because she's not that great an actress. She's
Mhm.
okay, but by giving her no vocal lines, by making her speak in sign language, she became much more interesting as a character. And my favorite part of the whole movie is when her eyes are bugging out of her head with such outrage when she's been stabbed at the end.
Oh yeah,
And here's a great parallel. She's lying there, probably dying, and she says something like "be seeing you," and Wick, on his way out because he's defeated her, essentially says, "Yeah, okay." Like he
sure,
acknowledges that it's at
for
least
sure. Yeah,
possible. Yeah, it's at least possible she'll catch up. And that's the consideration that he does not give to Zero, because while he sort of saw this woman as maybe he defeated her, but she's still an equal. He has respect for her in some way. A respect that he did not have for Zero, I think specifically because Zero's insecurity made him irritating. There's that scene where they're in the waiting room in the Continental, and Zero sits down right next to him, and Wick, disgusted, gets up and moves because he doesn't want to sit next to this fanboy, and that's an important sort of piece of reference. Like he doesn't respect the Zero character in
yeah,
the same way that he respects most of the enemies he comes up against.
yes. As
And
skilled
it's
as
because the dude is annoying.
yes, it's who you are as a person. I don't care how skilled you are. If you're like I say,
Yeah,
you can be completely stupid or a jerk, but you can't be both.
yeah.
Uh,
He was so annoyed by how obnoxious that guy was that he wasn't willing to give him anything, even when he
yeah.
was dying.
Mm.
And because he's shown repeatedly that he has a kind of mercy when he's defeated you. Hey, if you live through this, like with Common,
Comedy.
good luck. And there's that wonderful moment where the train goes end of line while Common is lying there with the knife in his aorta or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and he
Uh-huh.
smiles because he knows, yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
live through this. It's going to suck, but I don't know if we get to see him in John Wick 4. I hope we do. And
Me
if he
too.
does come back in 4 and they make a 5, I hope they bring him back for that because it
Me
would be
too.
really nice. You
Yes.
know,
Yes. Too.
Eh,
Um,
when a character has a sense of history from multiple movies, that always makes them so much more fun.
yeah.
When they come back to reprise a role and there's story history between him and the other characters.
Yeah. Which I just realized, thanks to you, what the common thread that there he is again. The common thread that all of my never fails. All my favorite knife sequences in there. Okay, Ruby. She stops the cold steel safe maker, the large one, with her hand, and then he just pushes through her momentum into her chest. Common, same thing. I think he hugs it out with him to accomplish that. And in the first one, the kitchen scene, that ends with the knife, and he can't quite do it, so he
Yes.
has to hit it into the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently I
Phonetically,
like that, or I feel that it's. And
I
anyway,
think it's because it realistically represents what it's like to use a knife
yeah,
in terms of its physics. In that kitchen scene, there is a sequence where he can't help but pull the knife up a little bit while he's pantomiming hitting it. I just hit my own microphone. It's kind of an involuntary motion. You don't really notice it unless you're really looking for it. But because he's only pantomiming stabbing the knife and there's nothing there below the eye line of the camera, he lifts up a little bit when he shouldn't. And I noticed it when I, on one of the many rewatches. I'm like, oh, he lifted up a little bit there, but
yeah,
it's still a great scene.
yeah. I think it's indicative of the fact that you have two choices if you are unlucky enough to get down to that, and it's either try and break free of that and go right back in as strongly as you can, or stay here because you made it this far and try and force it in. Either way, you take a risk, but I like his style, I guess.
Yeah, that
Um,
the most realistic treatments of knives in movies, it shows you how easy it is to repeatedly stab and injure somebody.
mm,
There's a sequence in The Raid where he stabs a guy like all up the guy's body while he's working him over. There's a sequence in The Man from Nowhere where our hero he's holding a guy and stabbing him while holding him immobile while making eye contact with the guy he's trying to murder. And it's the most awesome moment. Like, I'm killing him, but I really want to kill you.
the things we laugh about on the show here, but
Well, I mean,
oh yeah,
it is all takes place in a realm of fantasy. I mean,
yeah.
um, these are to knives
Oh,
and
okay,
modern tactical stuff. What The Quick and the Dead with Sharon Stone is to westerns.
yeah,
That's a fantasy western directed by Sam Raimi. And it takes place in a fantasy universe that bears no reality. There's no resemblance to reality.
yeah. Particularly where the guy takes a 45 in the cranium and he actually flips in the air backwards.
Well,
Like,
lots of movies are guilty of bad bullet physics.
yeah,
Anytime, you show a guy getting shot with a shotgun and he flies through the air, physics tells you that the guy holding the shotgun should be flying in the opposite direction.
so what was your answer to um, what's your favorite one with the action?
Uh, I think it's three, just because
Okay,
the action of the movies gets better as you go because they have to top
yeah,
it. So I
right,
think my favorite for the action is always going to be each latest movie.
yeah. Well, I
I
like
mean, I suppose they might backtrack a little bit, but
I like three because of I was always wanting more knife stuff, and I was the only weirdo in the and mom was there and sitting next to me, and everyone in the theater around us was like, because when the knife, they look at the wall and they start breaking out the glass and they throw the knives at each other, and like very realistically, every other one is hitting and they're messing up, and it's just chaos. I died laughing hysterically, and everyone was like, it was funny. But anyway, I like the third one because of all the there's a lot of knife stuff. We see some, I think when he goes to Morocco, we see some jambias. They're very prominent in the dark
yeah.
hallway there.
Yeah,
Um,
the sequence in the whatever the facility is in Morocco
oh,
with
the
where the
sculpting.
dogs Halle Berry are part of it. That's
Yeah.
actually my least favorite gunfight of the franchise. I find that whole sequence kind of overlong and not very compelling.
Mhm.
Compared to other movies, it's still great, but I just if I had to pick a least favorite, that would probably be it. What I like about the knife fight scene in the this inexplicable weapons museum in the middle of Manhattan is that at the end, he's defeated them all. He could just leave, but he takes the time to throw that last axe into the guy because but now he's annoyed.
Yeah.
And John Wick expresses his irritation by withdrawing mercy that he might otherwise extend.
Yeah. Or I don't know, like you want to, if you're running for your life, as I recall, that guy did pull a knife out. Like he might conceivably get
Yeah,
back.
but he was on the ground. Wick was
I
way
know.
far
Yeah.
away. He could easily have just left. He took the time to kill that guy, I believe, because he was annoyed.
Yeah. Heck of
Like,
a
I
throw.
am having a Monday.
We can assume all of this transpired on a Monday. We can.
Yes, Mondays, am I right?
Yeah. Um, so Okay. Oh, yeah. Cinematographically, I like set elements, and I love the Arabic influence of the third one. But I like, as far as camera work, the second one is my favorite. Reflection shots everywhere in all caps, and it was almost too much, but it had this wonderful depth to everything.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's a
also,
beautifully lighted sort of
yes,
movie.
totally. And also the best representation is probably in the where we first meet Santino when he comes to John's house at the beginning of the movie, where it's like this, the good and the bad and the ugly. They used to do, a close up and then a side and then a side and then a close
Yeah,
up, and they repeat that series. They did that all throughout the second one, and just really interesting choice, gave it kind of a slightly vintage feel, and then it would, in between that, um, like you were talking about, had these sweeping shots like of Rome and, kind of the third person view. So anyway,
well, and there's a great sequence when he's setting up his assassination for the second film. Instead of showing him going in sequence to all of the places he goes to prepare, he goes to see the sommelier, and he goes to the map guy, and he goes to
mhm.
somewhere else, the tailor, I think it is.
Yeah,
They splice all that together to make it more interesting, which I appreciated. It makes the whole sequence much
yeah,
more interesting than if we were to see those things in succession, because it turns his preparation into more of a montage, which kind of relieves you of the tedious feel of, now I got to go here, and now I got to go there, and now
right.
I got to
A
do these
typical
things.
montage thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so because it's necessary for narrative reasons to show him getting ready, and it shows that John is a meticulous sort of person, and he knows how to do this kind of thing. And everyone loves the sommelier scenes. That's
Me
so
too.
he's such a great character.
Hmm.
And I think deep down, every one of us would love to have the open credit card to just go and buy
Yep.
all this cool stuff.
Mm.
So
Um, okay, so for wrap up, I'm going to give my predictions for episode 4, and then you give me yours. Mine is that, first and foremost, I sense that your girlfriend was precisely correct. I told you a year ago, or whenever the third one came out, 2 years ago, that the elder that has his ring and possibly finger, there's going to
let's
come.
hope he threw the finger away. I mean,
Although
don't keep that.
if you're going to distract John Wick, that might be the one way you can. It's like throw. Okay,
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm going to flick their own finger at you. You might say I gave you the finger, Mr. Wick. Mwah.
That's your dad joke for the day, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I didn't have to do it, so I think there's got to come some personal confrontation, one on one, between him and the elder, because he's got the ring in his pocket.
I
Uh,
don't know if we should expect to see him again. There was a very brief clip in the most recent preview for the movie where there was like a rug set out outside that kind of reminded me of when we see the elder in that film. So maybe there'll be a revisit of that. I don't know if that actor's in it. I suppose I could look on IMDb to see if
oh yeah, yeah,
I know that actor's name. It's like Clifford W. Clifford or something like that. He was
something.
he was in one of the Boondock Saints sequels,
Oh
if I'm not mistaken.
wow, okay. Anyway,
Yeah,
I think that I hope that the marker that we see at the end of part 2 will. I mean, there has to be some reason that you would need a marker to go to Winston. And we have that reason now because the
well, yeah,
adjudicator was
because
like, okay, if you ever see John, let me know, kind of, because we need to kill him. So now John has a good reason to present that marker to Winston to get help.
well, and not only that, but Winston was covering his own butt because he could say, "Well, I had a marker. I
Oh,
can't
wow. Yeah,
disregard the marker. They'll kill me."
that's true. Wow. I didn't think of that.
So, in
Okay.
giving John what looks like a favor, he's almost covering his own butt
Mhm.
because we're all living with the mystery of did Winston betray him or not, and I just can't believe that he did.
I refuse to believe that. Yeah. And I was really hoping that Chris Walken would be involved somehow in this one. I don't know, but he's not. Um,
I think he's busy filming. He's busy being the Emperor in Dune.
oh, right. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
I hear you've got a navigator who could bend space and time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's yeah. I don't know enough
So,
about Dune
do
to make
you
a joke. So,
do you have any of that spice? because you can't just do high walk-in register. You got to get down to the low walk-in register. It's high until you get really annoyed, and you got to come down low.
Yeah, like Kings of New York walk-in was probably top form walk-in.
Yes, and that is peak walk-in. And what I love about Kings of New York, it's a wonderful movie. It's one of my favorites. And there are no good guys in it. There is not a single good person in the film. All the cops are corrupt. All the bad guys are bad guys. Everybody is a villain. It's a wonderful movie.
Yeah, I love there's a table scene where he reappears sort of out of the abyss to these guys that are playing cards that he used to, I guess, be in the gang with or whatever. And I can't remember his line. It's like, and Nickelback on the street gets moved. I want in.
Yeah.
You hear me? It's like really gets in their face, and he's walking off, and some guy smarts off, and he just turns around and pegs him with a Browning high power. But anyway.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's I'm pleased that you know that film because most people have not seen it.
Okay. Sorry, do you have any predictions for the next film?
Well, I like I said, I'm looking forward to Donnie Yen as sort of the Zatoichi assassin. That there has to be a climactic fight with that character in this film. If there's not, they've cheated us.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I mean, clearly there's going to be a sequence where he duels this guy who's apparently now in charge of the table, I guess. Some guy we haven't seen before in the John Wick franchise.
Okay.
And I know it's the Skarsgård kid. He's the youngest Skarsgård.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that will probably be this lame thing where they duel each other, and I don't know, maybe John will show him mercy or something. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out per the logic of the film. And then really it comes down to like, where is this going to leave him positioned? Because as much as I was hoping John Wick 3 would be the final John Wick so I could say I'd seen the whole thing, clearly they have other plans. So like this will probably leave him positioned for yet another film. What I wish they could work it out so that it gives us an ending that is reasonably satisfactory, but not necessarily a final ending. Like they could keep going if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the end of John Wick 1 did that. At the end of John Wick 1, he survives, he's got a new dog, and yes, there's potential for another film, but it's not a cliffhanger. And what I don't want is like a John Wick 3 where, clearly there's more movie to come. Like I want something satisfactory.
Yes, something rewarding for all of the emotional investment that we put into this series.
Yeah. The last thing I want is to be like, until next time when John Wick returns, like, damn it. You got to give me something. It's going to be years before the next one. Because whenever a show that I like, whenever the season is over and I have to wait, whenever a movie ends on a cliffhanger and I have to wait for the next film, I have to shut that part of my brain off that likes that thing, or else it will bother me. And sometimes I shut that part of my brain off so hard that when it does come back, I don't really care anymore. So,
and I think that's often the downfall of a lot of series, I think, is people are like that.
Yeah, if there's a big delay in between, and the pandemic messed a lot of properties up that way. If there's a too long of a delay, you just won't care. Just the time it takes to make a sequel to an animated film has doomed many an animated film that was popular with children because they aged out of the audience for that movie. The kids who were into Frozen when Frozen first came out, by the time they managed to get that second film made, all of those kids were like in junior high and high school and didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Facts. All right, and shout out. Okay, I'm real excited. There we go. That guy whose name I had to look up because my Japanese is bad. Hiroyuki Sanada.
Oh yes. He's. I keep forgetting that he's in a film. He is so great.
He's amazing. I've been a fan since Last Samurai, and like I literally would just go see it if no one else interesting were in the film but him. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where these people line up, who's a friend, who's an enemy.
Well, supposedly he's a friend.
Yeah.
So I'm glad of that.
Well, you never know how seriously you can take those things, though, because when they're preparing you for the movie, they don't always tell you everything. And sometimes they outright lie. I mean, sometimes those lies are more obvious than others. Like when they said that Benedict Cumberbatch was playing somebody we'd never heard of in the Star Trek franchise. Then he ended up being Khan, and that didn't make any sense either. But, they lied about it up front. So, who knows?
Okay. Well, we will see. And thank you for doing this today. I'm
Yeah,
excited,
anytime.
and be seeing you.
All right, man. Thanks.